This is the Weigh-In Podcast by Sylvester Romero and Ben Chestnut.
Yes, the weigh-in. The weigh-in podcast is an idea that we, as friends for a long time, have came up with. I am a long-time college athlete, wrestler. I have been around the sports probably since I've been born, and this is what we are. We are the weigh-in podcast, and the weigh-in podcast is going to bring to you the three-dimensional parts of sports. There's more than just being an athlete. There's being out there being the athlete, and then there's other times to it. In college, I wrestled in college. I was hurt all of college wrestling. I was hurt a lot of that time, and there's that mental aspect to that, to the point where you want to learn mentally, and we're going to share our experiences here, as well as we are going to cover some of the biggest, baddest fights on the planet, like the one last week, Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz. We will talk about a little bit after our intros in explaining ourselves. So if I'm going to get back into explaining myself, I'm Benoit Chestnut. I wrestled all my life. That was the sport I did. I was a big wrestler, did a little bit of baseball, a little bit of football. I kind of stuck my hand into a lot of sports, but I learned a lot in that aspect. And then I went to college and wrestled, so I learned from there. And I'm going to share to you my knowledge. And now I am a turned boxer. I box now at Park Elite Boxing Academy. And it's a gym, and I'm really boxing. I'm staying serious and being into that everything into my training on my boxing journey. So that's going to be shared across with the weigh-in, and we're going to talk about the fights, as I said, and this is me.
All right, my name is Sylvester Romero. I'm 23. I'm Ecuadorian. Now, my career, how I started during high school. I didn't play any sports. The only thing I did do was I did trainings for the Rose Park High School football team my 4 years, and I learned by watching football and stuff that's a good sport, and I loved it. Doing the trains and being part of the football team was a blessing, because not only I got paid for it, but I got to do it also for free and work hard and do everything. And after I graduated from high school, I went to college to become a business major, and so far right now I have my associate's degree with my 2 years of business. Now, coming from that, I left that. I started training, like Benoit said, in the gym at Rosa Park High School. In Rosa Park, New Jersey.
Yeah, Park Elite Boxing Academy.
Park Elite Boxing Academy. We train there hard. The owner is personally such a great guy, and I think by him bringing us in and us boxing, I think I'm getting better and better boxing every day. And I think doing this podcast is going to be something great for being as boxers doing this and about doing every single sports.
Yeah, but would you say boxing gave you a purpose?
Yeah, I think boxing gave me the best
Okay.
purpose. This is the Weigh-In Podcast by Sylvester Romero
and Benoit Chestnut. On this week's Takedown Thursdays, it's a new segment started by the weigh-in. We're going to go Takedown Thursdays covering wrestling. This is the Weigh-In Podcast on the road. We are here with the number one ranked 165 pounder in the country in the United States, Jean-Pierre Valencia. I am one half of your co-host, Benoit Chestnut.
And I'm the other half, Sylvester Romero.
And on this week's weigh-in, we sit down with one of the number one prospects in the world. Yeah. We've seen Jean-Pierre Valencia fight a couple times, and it is truly, truly something to see for the fans of the weigh-in. He's a very well boxer, and we're going to talk about your upcoming bout with the 6-borough bout. This week on the Weigh-In Podcast with co-host Benoit and host Sebastian Romero, we have a special guest, professional boxer Daniel Gonzalez, known as the nickname Dangerous Daniel. On this week's weigh-in, we're going to break down with you a newly found professional boxer that has found himself with an impressive 1-0 knockout of his opponent in the second round. This is the Weigh-In Podcast by Benoit Chestnut and Sebastian Romero. And on this week's Takedown Thursdays, we have Roger Williams University Wrestling head coach, John Egan. It is a pleasure to have you on, Coach Egan.
Thank you guys very much. Looking forward to it.
This is the Weigh-In Podcast by Benoit Chestnut
and Sebastian Romero.
On this week's Weigh-In Podcast, we bring to you the rising up-and-coming star of pro boxing Daniel the Dangerous Gonzalez.
Sir, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me, guys.
Here on this week's Weigh In podcast, I'd like to bring to you on this segment, we're going to talk about that 285 heavyweight shakeup in the NCAAs and the return of Gable Steveson. And what does that do for that heavyweight stacked weight class? This is the Weigh In podcast by Benoit Chestnut.
And Sebastian Romero.
And on this week's Weigh In podcast, we bring to you a special guest, amateur MMA fighter Dakota Grooms. Is that how I say your last name? Right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Dakota Grooms. He is an MMA fighter, and that is this week's video, as we're going to bring to you actually our first ever MMA guest to be on the Weigh In.
Exactly.
So, let's kick it
appreciate
off.
y'all having me.
This is the Weigh In podcast by Benoit Chestnut. And on this week's Weigh In, we bring to you guys the talk about John Jones retiring. And then we bring to you back on the Jake Paul, because it's fight week for Jake Paul. You know, there's been some rumors circulating Jake Paul might possibly be scheduling a fight against a current world champ. So we're going to see how that feels, how that looks, and we're going to break it down. So let's get right into it on this week's Weigh-In. This is the Weigh-In podcast by Benoit Chestnut, and normally Sebastian Romero, but he will return at some point. So on this week's Weigh-In, this is the week of Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor. Taylor versus Amanda. This is just what we've all been waiting for, because every time they fight, it's good. And then we're going to touch topic on the rumors that are going around about John Jones possibly putting himself back in the UFC testing pool. So amidst all of that, it's going to be real interesting, so that is this week's Weigh-In. So let's get into this one. This is the Weigh-In podcast by Benoit Chestnut and normally Sebastian Romero on this one, but he will return at some point. Woo! So let's get into this one. So for this week, we got for you guys the breakdown of Pacquiao Barrios. Interesting. If you didn't see it, go ahead, look it up, spoil it for yourself, because we're going to definitely spoil it on here. And we're also going to touch that Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier. We're going to touch that because that was that was interesting as well. But nonetheless, I think we'll touch Dustin Poirier and Max Holloway first. But nonetheless, that is this week's Weigh-In. So let's get into this one. This is the Weigh-In podcast by Benoit Chestnut and the occasional pop-in Sebastian Romero. On this week's Weigh-In, we break down UFC 320. So if you missed it, we're going to break down that UFC 320 because we didn't miss it. And was it a good old stacked up card that I liked. So I felt like on this UFC 320, we got a lot of new stars on here, but I still felt like it was a really good card. And it was really good scheduling. And we're going to break that down for you. That is this week's Weigh-In. This is the Weigh-In podcast by Benoit Chestnut and the occasional pop-in Sebastian Romero. On this week's Weigh-In, we talked to you about the huge news that came out. Tank Davis versus Jake Paul is now canceled. Interesting. And whatever else comes up in the time of recording. So, with that being said, that is this week's Weigh-In. This is the Weigh-In podcast by Benoit Chestnut and the occasional pop-in Sebastian Romero. On this week's Takedown Thursday, the video you all have been waiting for, we've got a lot of messages on this one. The breakdown of whether if Bo Bassett wrestles Caldwell at Real American Freestyle, what does it look like for his eligibility? And this is the question you've all asked us, and I do have to put the disclaimer out to start that, everything is technically speculation. We're going to try to bring as many facts as we can here as we have this stuff, but the difference is, again, nothing here is official. So please understand that nothing here is official. It's not official anything said. It's just facts and findings on what we believe in our investigation. But nonetheless, that is this week's weigh-in. This is the Weigh-In Podcast by Ben Quad Chestnut and the occasional Hop-In Sebastian Romero. Here we are, episode 100. As you saw before, I just announced the intro. You saw all the past videos. We put a little compilation of the best videos that we liked on our channel. And it's so surreal to be here at episode 100, to actually be here. So for episode 100, we're going to break down that kind of new USA Wrestling rule. I don't know if it's new or if they're just kind of emphasizing it, but it feels like it's new to me. And we're going to talk about what went down at the national duels, the Paycom national duels, which if you missed those, they were really good. So we'll get you on that. So let's get it going. That is this week's Takedown Thursday, episode 100. So if we jump right into this one. So first and foremost, the new USA Wrestling rule, it says that if an athlete kind of is to compete with a different nation, basically other than USA, it would basically, in a sense, mark them ineligible for Fargo. So really, it says the regional and the national, the USA Wrestling regional and national. And how I kind of feel about that is we talked about this on this podcast before, that we like when people go to other countries. USA has only so many limited spots to compete. People want to get medals. They're going to go to their home countries. But unfortunately, now they're starting to say that they will make kids ineligible for competing with their home nations, and not saying USA is their sporting nation. And it's really, I think it's a lousy rule, I think it's very lousy. I don't think it's a rule that should even be there. Like, I think you should encourage that more than you shouldn't. I get you want to have better competition here in USA, better this and that, but I think we're going to start to see less and less of those competitions. They're going to lose a lot of competitiveness, a lot of the stuff that we would have never thought it would lose. I kind of think they're going to lose a lot of that aggressiveness and a lot of that gamesmanship, in terms of that, the intensity. There's what I'm looking for. They're going to lose a lot of intensity in these events, because you're going to see people say, hey, I can't make Team USA. You say I'm ineligible? Fine. I'm going to wrestle for Team Italy, or I'm going to wrestle for Team Puerto Rico. And it really sucks, because they're characterizing Puerto Rico, which was clarified, in most cases, you're putting Puerto Rico in the same boat. They have their own national team that goes to Worlds. They have their own stuff. But now you're saying somebody competes for Team Puerto Rico, any U.S. territory, they still are not allowed, at the regional and the USA Wrestling Regional National. And I think it's a lousy rule. It's lousy. It's lousy. I don't think they should have it at all. I don't know what they think they were going on with that, but it's not right. There's only so many chances for these kids to compete. You look at how many spots are on U17 Worlds. How many spots do you have on U23? There's not enough. We even see this at the senior world level, that there's just not enough spots. And now you're telling these kids, well, no, you can't go to Puerto Rico and compete. You can't go to Italy and compete. You can't go to Mexico and compete. If you do so, you will not be at Fargo. And I think that's not right. I think USA Wrestling's got to understand you can't be a giant over everything. You are the governed body that runs wrestling, the largest governed body to run wrestling. And for you to turn around and be like, hey, yeah, you compete for another nation, yeah, we're done. Now, I get it. It is a USA Wrestling event, and you're like, hey, these are our events. And, I get, how it was flip side, how some of the arguments on Twitter were going, hey, well, you got to look at it this way. It is USA Wrestling's event, USA Wrestling. And if you're going to compete for another nation, that's not a path towards trying to make the world team for USA. You're using that as to compete, try to gauge yourself where you can get for your own nation. And it's like they were kind of saying, well, I agree with it. Well, the person on Twitter was saying they agree with it because they were saying, well, this is a USA Wrestling event. If you're not trying to get on USA Wrestling's team, then why are you going at our events and gauging yourself? No, you got to go to your own country's national, your own country's regional, and do all that over there. But I looked at it in the sense of, okay, you're barring Puerto Rico, which I kind of felt like, hey, they're with us. I just kind of felt like it was kind of like you're debarring U.S. territory nations too. But I look at it like this: it's lousy. But then again, when you make the claim of like, hey, it is a USA Wrestling event, but they're the largest governed body, and I think USA Wrestling shouldn't do things like that. But then, I could see very shortly how they get to where they're at, where they say, hey, it is a USA Wrestling event, and you're gonna go to all these USA Wrestling events and then go wrestle for Team Italy. Come on, like your USA Wrestling's trying to up their competition to help get the best people on their team, and you don't even care to want to be. But I think it's lousy. I think bringing up saying you can't compete in the national like Fargo and the regional, that has nothing to do with international wrestling. It's about state by state. Best wrestlers in the state come out. And I think that you're just going and just trying to say, hey, you can't do that if you do this. I think it's really just, I think it's lousy. I think you come up with that rule because you're just mad everybody, some top talent does not want to be with USA Wrestling, does not want to, go to U17 under USA because they know they're not going to make it. And I get that they might have been guys or gals that might have made boys or girls that might have made the team, but how do you know? How do you know they're going to make the team? How? You don't know if they would or would not have made it. And they want the competitive competition where you say, okay, you got people packing a gym because you got 1 and 2 facing each other. I get that, but you got to look at it like, okay, now they're mad because 1 and 2 won't face each other. If number 2 says I'm going to go wrestle for Italy, or number 2 says he's going to wrestle for Puerto Rico, or number 2 says he's going to wrestle for Mexico, you don't get that. I get that, but that's why if you want that, you set up an exhibition and you say, hey, USA Wrestling U17 versus Mexico U17. You set it up. You set it up with chances to compete. But nonetheless, that was my take on what may or may not be a new rule. Might have already been there. But then again, if you found that all kind of sort of confusing, I would say Google it. It's still pretty fresh. Everybody's kind of talking about it in certain ways. But if we talk about that, the national duels, those Paycom national duels, they were really good. First of all, I would have never thought Nick Feldman was going to beat AJ Ferrari. And if you didn't see it, well, you're getting spoiled. And who would have thought the type of team Ohio State's got this year? They look real solid. That Buckeye team looked really good up against Iowa. They looked real solid. It kind of told the story we needed to. This is what I want to know. Where was Penn State at the Paycom National Duel? Why is the Nittany Lions not there? So all these teams can take a chop at that. I guess they just didn't want to be there, maybe because it wasn't invitational. So I don't know why they weren't there, but maybe they just decided because you can get guys hurt that way. But it was really good though. I would have never thought. I thought in that Iowa Okie State duel, I thought Okie State I kind of thought, I didn't see some good wrestling. But you got to give credit where Dean Peterson had some good wrestling coming out of those national duels. He looked really good.
So if you didn't see some of those Dean Peterson matches, you look really good up till up. I think the whole Iowa team looked really good up till they faced that Ohio State team, where that Ohio State team, they ran away with it in the final. Like they were very. Those first 5 matches were Ohio State, and it was like, those first 5 looked really good for Ohio State, and it was really good stuff. And when you look at that, that Okie State Iowa duel was a close score duel. When I tell you that was really close, I think I'll look it up right now. I'm gonna look it up, but that duel was really close. Like that was a really close score duel that I thought was like, wow. That was really close, and I thought it was like duels like that. You want them like that. It reminds you of the old vibes of Penn State, Ohio State, back when Snyder was over there. Kyle Snyder was over there. Back when Snyder was over there, it really. It was 18-16. Iowa defeated Okie State. That's a really good duel right there. That's a really good duel because you look at you look at the way the swing matches go. That's a really good duel. If you didn't see that, that's a really good. There's going to be a lot to learn from that. An 18-16 duel, you can learn a lot from that, and that's what I'm talking about. Finding duels that are really good like that. That gave me the Ohio State, Penn State vibes back when Snyder had the last match. It was really good. I would love to see the Paycom national duels get bigger. They already said they're coming back next year, which is amazing. That's going to look good. Paycom national duels. I like how they put incentives in there. They got prize money. They got a takedown bonus. They got a lot of good stuff that's in there that Ohio State swept it all. But, well, most of it, I think. I believe very sure most of it. They got most of the bonuses for Paycom national duels. But really great thing when you look at when you look at the whole event. I would have liked to have seen Penn State there. See all those teams take a nip at Penn State, but we know that Nittany Lion team every year has got good strength. We wonder if it is this year because that might be a reason why they stepped out of Paycom national duels. If they were, we're not invited. I'm not speaking to that. I say to that, Google it. I think in Paycom, for the Paycom national duels, I think I would know why, if they were invited, why they wouldn't have gone. Because you look at now, all these teams get a chance to look at how they do against you, and it's going to look real well. You get to early matchup, and they get to figure you out. And instead, you don't go. They don't figure you out. But kind of one of those things where they're going to grow the national duels. It's great that they are, in a sense, brought back. And I think that's a really great thing, to have the national duels like that. But I don't think, except, as far as I saw, all the matches looked really good except where Ohio State ran away in the final, because that was kind of just. But the team score didn't really show how it went. It was really good. The difference is, I say this all the time, bonus. When you can turn a guy a couple times, it makes a difference. But what we learned a lot in some of those matches is when guys couldn't hold guys, down, and you say, hey, he gets an escape, I can't really ride him, they were taking him down again. And that's the difference. If you can't really ride the guy, they were cutting him and saying, hey, I'm trying to ride you, you're out. Hey, they're right in on another takedown and taking him back down again, letting him get back up. And I think that's a really good thing in terms of wrestling. That's a really good thing for that to have happened at the national duels. I think that was really good. I thought we saw some early matchups. So we saw Iowa, Ohio State, which we will also see that again later. We saw Iowa, Okie State, which I think Okie State, I feel like when next time they face Iowa, I feel like they're gonna win the dual meet. I think they're gonna win the dual meet. And I'm gonna tell you why, because now you lost, and now you get the chance to avenge your loss. So that's gonna look interesting. I really wanted Okie State, Ohio State in the national dual finals, but it didn't happen. But I thought it was some good competition. I think that you had some good teams there. What really surprised me, Nick Feldman beating AJ Ferrari. I really did not see that happening. I thought I really had that Nebraska team going to be up there a little further. Nick Feldman beating AJ Ferrari surprised me. It really surprised me. But I think Like I said AJ's adjusting to heavyweight. I think he's really adjusting, but I think he's gonna get revenge on that too. I think if they ever see each other again, I think AJ Ferrari's gonna avenge his loss to Nick Feldman because AJ Ferrari's a great wrestler, great wrestler. So in terms of Paycom, national duels, I thought that was really good. Like it was tough competition, hard competition. Like when you get an 18-16 duel, that's a good duel. I kind of think that it wasn't that many fans there. It didn't look like in the crowd for at least the final. I think what I would like to see, I think Paycom's doing a good thing with supporting this national duels or bringing it back. I think what we need to see is a bigger fan affair here. We got to get more fans, and I understand. You got to wait till you pack those arenas. We got to pack it up. People got to want to see this national duels because, first of all, national duels is like getting a preview of what you might see at NCAA's without getting a preview of seeing NCAA's because you know you're gonna see teams compete hard against each other. You get good dual meets out of that. You can't tell me you wouldn't want to be there in an 18-16 dual meet. That's down to the wire. That's something you want to be there for. So I really think it's going to get bigger, but I think the fanfare is going to get bigger along with more fans are going to get there. With the clashing. I think this year everybody was skeptical. They were like, it's national duels. It's going to be a runaway. Probably. It wasn't, though. Who would have ever thought Ohio State was going to win it? Like, it wasn't a runaway, man. It was not. It was not. An 18-16 duel meet, that ain't no runaway. That's down to the wire. You get AJ Ferrari, loses to Nick Feldman. No, you can't make this stuff up. National duels did not disappoint. And I think if you weren't there this year, I think next year you're going to want to be there, because it did not disappoint, Paycom National Duels. Now, I get they had it at the BO. Let me Google that before I tell you wrong. Uh, Let me figure this out for you. The BOK Center in Tulsa. I thought that was good, but I think that might play a little effect into why we didn't see a lot of fans. They might not have really wanted to go all the way out Tulsa, but I think in terms of the national duels, I think I know they talked about. I think it's going to be back in the same place, but I think in terms of the national duels, I think you gotta. What'll make it good is I understand you don't got now, but I really think you gotta change locations each year. So we can pull out more fans. We gotta get some more fans in Tulsa. We gotta pack Tulsa up too. We gotta sell it out. We gotta sell it out. National Duels did not disappoint this year, and I feel like we should have sold it out. Um, and that's a good thing. We gotta get it sold out. We gotta get it sold out so we could see that real nice. That's a good thing. But I thought the national duels didn't disappoint. I thought it was a really good thing, and I thought it was great. I thought it was really great, the national duels, and I thought it was really good. I thought it wasn't bad at all, in terms of national duels, in terms of all of that. Great wrestling. When you get I'm gonna say it again. When you get an 18-16 duel meet, it doesn't get no better than that. That's what I say. When you get an 18-16 duel meet that large, like that large, it doesn't really. You can't beat that. A huge 18-16 duel meet. like that. Good wrestling. Nobody would have ever thought AJ Ferrari. I saw some good wrestling out of Dean Peterson. Ohio State looked really good with some of those upsets they were pulling. We saw some good wrestling from a few freshmen. I think if you didn't see it at all, I think it's good to just kind of look at all of that. But what we learned here, which we were not already looking at in terms of talking this year, we learned that this is a really good Buckeye team, and if we don't have them finishing with a team trophy at NCAA's, I now think they will. I think that it's going to be interesting because I think there are 5 really good programs that could get a team title, a team trophy at NCAA's. You got Okie, I really do believe it. You got Iowa, I believe it. You got Nebraska, I believe it. You've got Ohio State, I believe it. And obviously, the same old every year, Penn State. But the potentially how that wrestling goes when we get down later in the season to that, it may make a difference. It may make a huge difference depending on what kind of wrestling we get going out. Because you got to think about this: 5 good teams, and it could be. We don't know, but it could be by 1 point, a few points. All teams could be off by a few points. It could be real difficult, real interesting, and that's going to be really good in terms of that. How for who's off, where and when and what and most of that. So it's going to be interesting in terms of it. But I think you got really good 5 programs that look really solid. Because I like that Nebraska team because they look really well. They look really well. So I think what's going to look interesting is when we see some of this potential other clashing. How does Ohio State do against Penn State? How does Iowa do against Penn State? That's going to be interesting. Some of that stuff, because Penn State had a Oklahoma. They were facing the Sooners. I'm like, why are you not at Paycom National Duels right now? Why? What? Like, what are you doing? You know what? I also thought about it like this. They didn't want that smoke because there was a lot of smoke going on at Paycom National Duels when you get an 18. I'm gonna say it one more time. I know, an 18-16 duel meet, but nonetheless, I think in terms of all of that, really good stuff coming out of that that Paycom National Duels. I think it was really good. I really do. I really, really do. I think there was good stuff. I think in terms of it, a lot of it looked very well. I think that was all great stuff. So I think that we're seeing an opening development. I think we're seeing, I think we saw. So we learned some stuff through that. We learned the vulnerability of the Cowboys, the Okie State Cowboys, and we learned the vulnerability of Iowa. Iowa really tore not really tore through because it was a close duel meet, but you learned how close they are in level, the competing of Iowa, Okie State. But you learned that Ohio State just exposed Iowa. They just exposed Iowa. You learned how Iowa got a little full of themselves and got beat, and they got to humble Okie State, but Okie State wasn't really humbled. You lost by 2 points. And that could be the matter of one match. So, I definitely think that had Dean Peterson not beat Troy Spratley, different story. So if I could pull up the I'm gonna pull up the I'm gonna pull up the how it went down for you so that we can kind of get a breakdown here of what went on. So let me get you that breakdown. Let's get you that breakdown. So let me get you. Dean Peterson beat Troy Spratley Drake Ayala beat Ronnie Ramirez. Dean Peterson beat Troy Spratley 5-4. Drake Ayala beat Ronnie Ramirez 7-4 sudden victory. So you look at this. If matter of one match, if Troy Spratley beat Dean Peterson, Okie State would have won the dual meet. Possible. We had Sergio Vega beat number 9 Nazir Bailey, and so that was sudden victory. We had Ryder Block defeat Casey Swerskowski 5-3. We had London Reboot beat Victor Vonovich 16-5. We had Darren Lockett defeat number 2 Michael Carliendo, which that one surprised me right there. Michael Carliendo is, a really good wrestler, and to lose to Landon Lockett surprised me, but I'm an Okie, so I liked it. Number 2 Patrick Kennedy defeated Alex Fandango, sudden victory. That's another one. You had Angelo Ferrari defeated Zach Ryder 4-2. That one did not surprise me because we know Angelo Ferrari last season tore through Dustin Plott. Angelo Ferrari can wrestle, so that was not one that I would have. Mosama Endine. Finally, after all this time, I got the name right. Mosama Endine defeated Cody Morelli 4-3. And Connor Doche forfeit Iowa. So you look at you look at that, and you say, okay, with all of that, let's find the plausibles here for us Okie fans. So right now we got 125. Troy Spratley should have had it. Spratley should have had it. And at 174, Alex Fandango, come on, buddy. I think those are the two. You gotta. I get Patrick Kennedy's the number 2 in the country, and he was only 17, but some good wrestling. So I'm not disappointed. Why? Because now I know the next time when they have the next dual meet, that one's not gonna disappoint. I think it's gonna be Okie because the mistakes that I was able to get through now, it's not gonna happen again. It's not gonna happen again. And if you're if you're Okie, don't expect that you're gonna get another forfeit of heavyweight. So the next dual meet they will have is at Stillwater Gallagher Arena, February 22nd, 5 p.m. ESPN 2. So that is what we're looking towards. That's going to be a good one. Why? Because first of all, you're in Stillwater. Okie State's home. And when you get in there, the lights, everything's different. And I say that because we all remember Nick Piccinini pinned Spencer Lee at Gallagher Arena. And that was the start of the dual meet. And if you didn't see that one, Flow Wrestling, I believe, has the full dual meet on their YouTube channel. So if you didn't, or you could basically Google it. YouTube it, and it's everywhere. Everybody's got that rolling because it was the golden boy of NCAA wrestling, Spencer Lee, getting pinned by Nick Piccinini. But don't even worry, Spencer Lee beat Nick Piccinini at NCAA's, but that was a good dual meet where he just locked him up, man. Locked him up with a cradle. And that is what we talk about. And we saw a few of those this weekend at Paycom National Duels. That is the most dangerous cradle, is when you go into a splits. Give me a second here. You go into a splits, and they clack you up, and they David Taylor roll you over. That's the David Taylor. And I say that because David Taylor rolled Jordan Burroughs with it, and had he been in bounds, Jordan Burroughs would have lost that match a long time ago. David Taylor was young. Turned around, and David Taylor came out with the headgear on. Jordan Burroughs said, nah, what's this with the headgear? Take that headgear off. Do the headgear. Come on. Do the headgear off and backed him up, rolled him. I call it the Taylor roll. The David Taylor roll. The Taylor roll. The David Taylor cradle. Great cradle, but everybody used David Taylor. That's the first time I saw it was David Taylor rolled somebody through with it. And at that, a legend. So I kind of feel like, you know, when you get that Okie State duel, I don't think it's going to go the way it is. Troy Spratley is going to want to avenge his loss against Dean Peterson. He's going to want to avenge his loss against Dean Peterson. Dean Peterson's another huge cradle guy. Dean Peterson is always locking somebody up and pinning somebody in situations you would never think. Like you look, and that's how he had the pin last season. He had the pin last season. That's what I'm like. That's why I'm like, man, Dean is always pinning somebody. Dean is always pinning somebody. And I'm like, dang, man. That's why I'm like, Dean is always pinning somebody. That's why I'm like, man, Dean is always turning around, just pinning somebody. Like, that's what I say. When is Dean not pinning somebody? You know, Dean's always Richie Figueroa, Richie Figs got locked up by Dean Peterson. Like, what in the world? You know, Dean's always pinning somebody, but that Gallagher Arena duel, different. It's different. We all know it's different because Spencer got pinned. Yeah, I know for the Iowa fans that watch us, I hate to always bring up Spencer getting pinned, but I get it. But at least you don't have me bringing up him getting pinned at NCAAs. But nonetheless, that is episode 100. Big epi, really big epi getting out there for everybody. So surreal to be at 100 episodes of the weigh-in, really big. So with that being said, this is episode 100, the 100th episode special of Takedown of the weigh-in. This is really great, but that's all I got for you on today. So this is the weigh-in by Benoit Chestnut and the occasional pop-in Sebastian Romero. I will see you on the next one, and you got me again with it, not saying like, comment, subscribe, share. I said it this time. Like, comment, subscribe, share. You've always hit me up through all the social medias and Edward saying, hey, what happened to like, comment, subscribe, share at the end of the video? I got you. Like, comment, subscribe, and share the video. This is episode 100 of the Weigh-In Podcast and a Takedown Thursday episode. Weigh-In out.
The Weigh-In,